Here are a few more stories in case you missed it. I'm Ernest Bethea, the last outlaw. This is Bethea's Bite, and it's reloaded. Prosecutors in the Karen Reed case withdrew a request to seal correspondence between their office and federal authorities and released the 8 letters themselves, saying they reversed course to prevent Reed's lawyers from making any more false statements about the nature of the letters or federal probe referenced therein. The letters indicate that the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts conducted an investigation in 2023 that involved witnesses from Reed's case, but they do not explicitly say who or what the investigation was about. The current status of the federal investigation is not clear from the letters, which span from April to November of 2023. The letters reveal that Norfolk District Attorney Michael Morrissey was concerned that the federal investigation might interfere with his office's prosecution of Reed for the death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, and constitute an abuse of prosecutorial discretion. In a letter dated May 18, 2023, Morrissey asked the Department of Justice to transfer the investigation to another office based on his belief that the Massachusetts U.S. Attorney's Office was being weaponized for personal, political, and retributive purposes against his office, possibly because of an employment dispute. Norfolk Assistant District Attorney Adam Lally attached the letters to a motion to withdraw the Commonwealth's request for a protective order for the letters. The U.S. Attorney's Office also consented to the public disclosure of the letters, Lally said. Quote, to prevent further attempts by the defendant to mischaracterize the Commonwealth's correspondence as an attempt to materially prejudice the Commonwealth and threaten the integrity of the judicial system as a whole, the Commonwealth respectfully moves to withdraw its previous motion of a protective order and let the correspondence speak for itself. End quote. In a hearing last Thursday, Reed's attorney David Yannetti said the defense learned in a conference call that Morrissey had become a target of a federal investigation for his prosecution of Reed. Yannetti said he intended to use the content of the letters to litigate its motion for sanctions and disqualification of the Norfolk DA's office. Yannetti's claims prompted swift repudiations from the Norfolk District Attorney and the U.S. Attorney's Office. In connection with this matter, at no time has the U.S. Attorney's Office named any person or entity as a target of an investigation to anyone, the U.S. Attorney's Office said in a statement. State prosecutors also responded with a statement that read, no part of the communication with the office or of the United States Attorney yesterday or at any point has indicated that the Norfolk District Attorney or any member of the office is a target of a federal investigation. Mr. Yannetti misrepresented that completely. The letters reveal that Morrissey and his staff were pressing the feds for information gleaned from their investigation in early 2023. In his May 18th letter to the U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Professional Responsibility, Morrissey said his office found out that the FBI contacted state grand jury witnesses, who also received subpoenas to appear before a federal grand jury. Then Joshua Levy, first assistant in the U.S. Attorney's Boston office, contacted Morrissey's office to say they were conducting an investigation that may involve witnesses in the state's case. Morrissey said in the letter that his deputy, Lynn Bleland, told Levy that ethical obligations may require the state prosecutors to provide Reed's defense with information gathered in a federal investigation. You can't turn over information you don't have, Levy responded, allegedly. Morrissey speculated in the letter that Reed's defense might have initiated the complaint that triggered the federal prosecution, but suggested other factors may have been at play. Quote, it appears to be unprecedented for the federal government to step in the middle of an ongoing state murder prosecution prompted only by an inflammatory and ethically dubious defense strategy. It raises the question why the apparatus of the DOJ would intervene without additional impetus on the part of the United States Attorney's Office, end quote. Morrissey speculated that the probe might stem from former U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins' animosity toward him and pointed to a DOJ report that faulted Rollins for ethical violations. Or he surmised that it could be personal retaliation from an assistant U.S. attorney whose wife resigned from Morrissey's office on bad terms. These DOJ findings and questions reinforce my belief that the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Massachusetts must be removed from whatever investigation being conducted into the Reed matter, Morrissey wrote. The Office of Professional Responsibility sent Morrissey's request to transfer the investigation to the Executive Office of the United States Attorneys. Morrissey's deputy, Lynn Bleeland, sent a follow-up letter to the department in June 2023 to check on the status of the request. That letter, along with two others Bleeland sent to Levy, requesting discovery in the federal probe, were among the correspondence released by the Norfolk District Attorney's Office. The attorneys of Chad Dorman, the man accused of murdering his 3 sons, had filed a motion to suppress evidence, including an alleged confession, claiming deputies in the Clermont County Sheriff's Office ignored Dorman's request for a lawyer and interrogated him for 3 hours anyway. Officials with the Clermont County Sheriff's Office announced not long after Dorman's arrest that he'd confessed to shooting 4-year-old Hunter, 7-year-old Clayton, and 3-year-old Chase execution style. Despite this, Dorman pleaded not guilty in court on June 23rd. Now Dorman's attorneys claim officers in the Clermont County Sheriff's Office ignored his request for counsel, coerced him during the interrogation, and recorded sessions with medical professionals and his lawyers that should have been private. The motion seeks to stop the state from being able to use statements made by Dorman in the interrogation during his trial. It also seeks to suppress any conversations or statements he made to medical professionals while officers were present. From the beginning of Dorman's interaction with Clermont County Sheriff's deputies, his attorney said his remand rights were violated because deputies never had him sign a constitutionally valid waiver of those rights. Instead, deputies only obtained a verbal affirmation from Dorman that his attorney said was not an overt waiver. After a detective read Dorman his Miranda rights, the motion says the detective asked if Dorman understood those rights. Mr. Dorman responds yep and nods affirmatively, reads the motion. Mr. Dorman is never presented with a written copy of his rights. Then, 5 minutes after that, the motion says Dorman asked for a lawyer. I'll wait for a lawyer, said Dorman, according to the motion. I really don't know. Give me a couple of days and let me talk to a lawyer so I can get nice, good answers. Detective: I understand. Do you have a lawyer? Dorman: we have family lawyers. Detective: who is that? Is there somebody I can call? Dorman: Keith Dorman. Detective: is he related to you? Dorman: yes. Detective: how is Keith related to you? My dad. Ruby Franklin. She's in the CIA. Detective: is she a lawyer? Is Ruby a lawyer? Dorman: she is in the CIA. Detective: I know I heard you say that, but I didn't know maybe if she was a CIA attorney or... But you said your dad is a lawyer? Dorman: Negative. We have a family lawyer. Detective: all right, but you don't know who that is? Dorman: no. From there, the motion says the detective steps out of the room for roughly 1.5 minutes. When he returns, the motion says the same detective resumed questioning Dorman, as if he hadn't just requested an attorney. According to the motion, the detective continued questioning Dorman for 45 more minutes, when Dorman again mentioned a lawyer. Where's a lawyer? Said Dorman, according to the documents. Detective: Laura? Dorman: a lawyer. Detective: I don't know, you tell me. The motion says the interrogation of Dorman in total lasted 3 hours, during which he invoked his right to counsel at least twice. There are 3 issues with the interrogation of Chad Dorman, reads the motion. A. The initial waiver. B. Mr. Dorman's request for an attorney during the interrogation. And C. The coercive tactics used by the police. The motion goes on to say that given the circumstances, Dorman's mental condition at the time, and detectives' disregard for his request for an attorney, Dorman's confession cannot be considered voluntary. The motion also alleges that while Dorman met with a mental health liaison with the Clermont County Jail, sheriff's deputies actively made themselves present by entering Mr. Dorman's jail cell with his healthcare providers for some of those privileged communications and recorded them, quote unquote. Those recordings and more made by sheriff's deputies during meetings between Dorman and a public defender were made through officers' body-worn cameras, the motion says. Ultimately, Dorman's attorneys claimed those officers violated his right to privacy, quote, by inserting themselves into what should have been a private, confidential discussions and recording them, end quote. As a result, the motion requests any statements Dorman made in those moments be suppressed, along with the statements made during his interrogation with the Clermont County Sheriff's Office. Dorman's attorneys filed the motion on January 12th. The judge will make a decision in court on February 2nd. In total, Dorman faces 21 separate charges connected to his alleged actions on June 15, 2023. He is charged with 9 counts of aggravated murder, 8 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault. Dorman has been held in the Clermont County Jail on a $20 million bond since his arrest. Two years since unprecedented involuntary manslaughter charges were announced against them, the parents of the Oxford school shooter are preparing to go to trial. James and Jennifer Crumbly each face up to 60 years in prison for failing to stop their son Ethan Crumbly from killing 4 of his classmates. Legal experts nationwide are expected to watch the trials closely, as they're likely to have far-reaching implications for how future school shooter cases are handled by prosecutors. It's just such a terrifying thought that as a parent, and I think that probably consciously or subconsciously fuels Oakland County prosecutor Karen McDonald in bringing these charges, said attorney Michael Bellotta. For 23 years, Bellotta was a federal prosecutor in Detroit and Los Angeles. Now he's a criminal defense attorney. Would you rather defend this case or prosecute it, asked Scripps News Detroit's Ross Jones. It's such a tough case, Bellotta said. I certainly don't think I'd want to prosecute it. The parents did contribute to this, but did they cause the death? Key evidence in the trials is expected to include how Ethan's parents secured the gun he later used to commit the mass shooting, along with his cries for help. By charging each parent with involuntary manslaughter, the prosecution needs to prove 2 things. First, that the Crumbleys were grossly negligent, meaning they knew about the dangers posed by allowing their son to access a gun. And second, that the gun coupled with Ethan's cries for help made the Oxford shooting a foreseeable tragedy. I think the jury's first reaction is going to be, wow, I'm on this case where these 4 children died. It's incredibly tragic. It's unspeakable. It's unimaginable, Bellotta said. But if it's unimaginable, if it's so tragic and so horrible and unusual, how can it be foreseeable? While involuntary manslaughter charges are unprecedented in a case like this, there have been recent examples where parents of shooters have faced prosecution. Last year, a 6-year-old Virginia boy shot his teacher while using his mother's gun. She was charged with using marijuana while possessing a firearm, and in November was sentenced to 21 months in prison. That same month, a father of an Illinois man pleaded guilty to 7 misdemeanor charges of reckless conduct after he helped his son obtain a gun that he later used to kill 7 people. He was sentenced to 60 days in jail. When the case begins on January 23rd, the first order of business will be selecting a jury, a process that could take several days or longer given the case's high-profile nature. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to get a fair trial in Oakland County, given all the pre-trial publicity, said Mike Rataj, a criminal defense attorney. Rataj is surprised the case wasn't moved outside of Metro Detroit, where the case received less media attention. In the court of public opinion, these people are guilty, Rataj said. And what people need to keep in mind is that the Crumbleys are presumed to be innocent. At least some of the key evidence to be introduced at trial is already known. Recently, Judge Cheryl Matthews ruled to allow video from inside the school that day, along with the testimony of a teacher who was shot, an assistant principal who talked to Ethan before his arrest, and a witness to one of the 4 murders. When the first trial begins on Tuesday, the case will have the attention of lawyers nationwide. The verdict, if there is one, will influence how school shooting cases are charged going forward. This is a prime example of a case that could result in a mistrial, Bellotta said. There probably will be some jurors saying this is so horrible, these parents are terrible, they need to be held accountable. And then there's other jurors who say, hey, I'm a parent, I don't want to be responsible for the actions of my children. And now an update from BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded. New lawyers for the Oxford High School shooters say they will advise him not to testify in the trials for his parents, according to court documents. In a letter to Oakland County Circuit Court Judge Cheryl Matthews from the State Appellate Defender Office dated January 22nd, assistant defenders Jacqueline Overy and Allison Swain say they have been assigned to represent, and given that Ethan Crumbleys' ongoing appeal and the substantial overlap in the subject matter in these 3 cases, we will advise Ethan to invoke his right to remain silent should he be called to testify in either pending trial. James and Jennifer Crumbly each face 60 years in prison for failing to stop their son from killing his 4 classmates. Legal experts nationwide are expected to watch these trials closely, as they're likely to have far-reaching implications of how future school shooting cases are handled by prosecutors. Key evidence in the trials is expected to include how the shooter's parents secured the gun he later used to commit the mass shooting, along with his cries for help. By charging each parent with involuntary manslaughter, the prosecution needs to prove that the Crumbleys were grossly negligent, meaning that they knew about the dangers posed by allowing their son to access a gun, and that the gun, coupled with their son's cries for help, made the Oxford shooting a foreseeable tragedy. Jury selection for Jennifer Crumbly got underway Tuesday morning. Thanks for watching and joining me here at the drama-free true crime destination. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, and drop me a comment on this video. And be sure to follow BETHEA'S BYTE Reloaded all over social media. This is BETHEA'S BYTE, and it's reloaded.